voices of the many people who have changed their minds and would now vote to remain in any final say referendum, or hear all those young people who would now get a chance to have a real say on their future. And for this, I am truly concerned. I'm concerned for the country and I'm concerned for those people's futures. We're here, though, to scrutinise this legislation that does not even begin to meet the challenges that Brexit poses, that has taken out all elements that matter, and importantly, this Prime Minister is stripping Parliament of its voice and therefore denying the people and the country a say on its future. By scrapping powers for MPs to scrutinise future trade deals, we risk being forced to accept lower standards as a price for future trade agreements. Those trade deals will now be conducted behind closed doors and without proper scrutiny. Trade deals which have an impact on our communities, on our businesses and our people, risking workers' rights, environmental regulation, food standards. By denying Parliament a voice, you're denying democracy and denying people a voice. You cannot call this a people's government if the first thing you do is ignore the people's representatives. As MPs, we're here to ensure our communities, people's livelihoods, businesses, jobs and futures are looked after and safeguarded, and this government is taking away that opportunity. And this deal fails to guarantee the future of our environmental standards. The binding part of the agreement contains nothing about environmental standards across the UK, and the non-binding political declaration just notes that parties should maintain those important environmental standards. And with only 11 months to negotiate a trade deal with the EU, the risk of no deal has significantly increased, the worst of all scenarios. But what of our EU citizens? Those citizens should never become the victims of Brexit. And I speak to many of them in Cardiff North, living in fear and anxiety over the future. Some who have lived here most of their lives, with children born here and lives rooted firmly here. EU citizens must be assured of their rights and should be immediately granted full rights that they enjoy today. And the EU will reciprocate with those UK citizens living in the EU. But by taking away also Lord Dubb's amendment to safeguard child refugees, the Prime Minister and his party, the party that apparently was founded to conserve, is now eroding the rights and values we hold so dear, selling out the things that make this country great. This has become not only an exit from the EU, but an exit from our responsibilities and common decency, and I will be voting against it today. But finally, let me end by saying, this bill, this law, will not strip me of my European identity. I will always be both European and Welsh in equal measure. My values and my identity have been formed from being a part of the European Union. Those values of openness, tolerance, inclusivity, of equality and a trust in the public good. Those values are now under threat from this Trumpian populist government, from right-wing populism and bigots everywhere. For me and for many of my constituents, leaving the EU will be a profound and deep loss. There is a reason why the many millions of us marched on the streets and have gone out of our way to fight for a future within the EU. Being European is an identity we want to keep. Allow us to keep it.
Thank you. Before I call Bob Seeley, I must now impose, I'm afraid, a formal limit of 4 minutes per speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That means if I take an intervention, I can have an extra minute, doesn't it? No. That's what it's like.
But you'll lose lots of friends on this side.
Oh no, we can't.
Lose lots of friends.
We can't have that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank my constituents on the Isle of Wight for re-electing me. It remains a huge privilege to work on their behalf, and I look forward to continuing to do so. It's a privilege to follow the honourable member for Cardiff North. I found her arguments about our democracy straight after a very clear general election to be somewhat tortuous, and as someone who's half English and who's half German, I love Europe. I'm not sure I want to be part of the European Union. In fact, I know I don't. They are different things. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Groundhog Day is ending. Thank God, democracy has reasserted itself. In the words of the guitar piece I'm trying to learn for Christmas, Jeff Buckley's cover, Hallelujah. The delay, frankly, has been a disgrace. MPs in a functioning democracy cannot choose which votes they respect, and they cannot call for new referendums because they didn't like the arguments or they didn't like the results of previous referendums. The party opposite has been defenestrated because they refused to carry out the pledge in 2017. And we hear two different versions of the future, one from the Honourable Member of Cardiff North, which is effectively denial, and one from the Honourable Member for South Shields, which is to accept the result and try to rebuild. One offers a route out for the Labour Party, one offers a route to an existential crisis and a chance never to hold power again. And it is up to them which way they take it. But throughout this summer, we had a Labour Party leadership led by several new leadership candidates now who are tying themselves in knots like some sort of incompetent Houdini and then forever being unable to get itself out of those tortuous knots in which it was tying itself. The Honourable Member for Dulwich and Norwood was absolutely right to say that her folks did not vote for Brexit, and she is right to champion Remain. However, in over 100 Labour seats, 52, that's in the previous Parliament, 52 had Leave majorities of over 60%, and 8 had Leave majorities of more than 70%. And many of those former honourable members are now looking for jobs because they did not listen to their people. And there is a lesson there for all of us. 17 million people voted to leave because they felt the political system no longer represented them. The European Union was not always part of the problem, but as the honourable member for the Deepings and South Holland shows, it wasn't part of the solution either. I am delighted that we are leaving the European Union because there has always been a relentless federalising agenda with which Britons have felt uncomfortable. But this is now our chance to chart a different course for a new great project. And this great project, as the Prime Minister says, is partly about leaving the European Union, but it is also partly about restoring folks' faith in democracy here and trust. And therefore, I look forward to voting for this important and great bill, and it's a good Christmas present for many of our constituents. We respect Remainers who voted to stay, but because we have a withdrawal deal, we can get the withdrawal deal through, and we can respect both sides while recognising that we are a Leave nation and we need to deliver for those people who voted in the 2016 referendum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I would like to thank the voters of Brentford and Isleworth, including Chiswick, Osterley and Hounslow, for returning me to this place last Thursday, and I commit to continue to serving them to the best of my ability. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister may have the majority in this House, but he doesn't in the country. Every opinion poll bar one this year showed a majority would vote to remain in a new referendum, and in the general election some 53% voted for parties promising to hold a new referendum. And as my friend for Greenwich said earlier, Brexit is a process, not an act that can be done quickly. Now, leaving our series of complex relationships built up over 40 years in just a year will, of course, be complex. So on behalf of our voters who voted Remain, like the majority of mine, and those who voted to leave, we have a duty to scrutinise this bill. It will have far-reaching consequences on our constituents, including those who had no vote last Thursday, the citizens of other EU countries who live here in the UK. And never has proper scrutiny of a bill been more important. Never have we had a Prime Minister that spends so much effort avoiding scrutiny. And we've noticed in recent weeks, when he can't avoid the question, he responds with a posh bloke version of Little Britain's Vicky Pollard. No, but you're. Now, with this House's most important legislation for many years, that withdraws our relationship with our allies and partners of 40 years, we have just 3 days of debate. And just a week after the election, and it seems promises on workers' rights have now been dropped. Now, I heard members opposite suggest it's okay because we can have higher standards than EU members. But let me remind them, the EU sets minimum standards for workers' rights. There's only one reason to remove minimum standards, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and that's because you want to fall below them. And on child refugees, the government is now threatening to scrap the right of refugee children to be reunited with their families here. How cruel is that? The government claim removal of the clause on refugee children is just for the purposes of negotiation. But as my friend the Lord Dubs said today, quote, vulnerable children are not bargaining chips. We should not be exploiting their misery for political purposes, but defending them as our own. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on trade, the previous Prime Minister's Special Advisor, Raul Ruparel, in the Institute of Government's recent paper, has warned that the UK is not match fit for the next phase of negotiations. I hope the government addresses this point. And finally, I want to address the issue raised in Clause 26, which allows ministers to give binding instructions by regulation to any court in the country and how to interpret and even how to disapply EU-retained case law, as well as domestic case law which relates to EU-retained law. My constituent, Ricardo Celestillo, a partner in an international law firm, contacted me last night with his concerns about Clause 26. He said, quote, given the wide application of EU-retained law, by allowing for EU-retained case law and related domestic case law to be interpreted by the executive, Parliament would breach the fundamental principle that courts should be independent and that parties in civil and criminal matters need to have certainty of interpretation when involved in a dispute. Mr. Deputy Speaker, for these and many other reasons outlined by my colleagues on this side of the House, I will vote against this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Streeter. And I'd like to start by thanking the voters of Dudley South, not just the 68% who voted to return me for a third time to this House, but also the other 32% who took part in what was a well-spirited and fair campaign. But throughout the 6 weeks of the general election campaign, knocking on doors not only around Dudley South, but also Dudley North and West Bromwich East, West Bromwich West, seats around the Black Country, there was a response that kept on coming back time and time again. It did not take slogans from political candidates or election broadcasts to raise the phrase, get Brexit done. It was coming from the doorstep. There was a determination, there was an impatience to get Brexit done. This bill that we are considering today will be one step closer to doing what should have been done a long time ago. Get Brexit done, do as we were told, do as we were instructed in the 2016 referendum. Because in all of those seats in which I was campaigning over the last 2 months, particularly in those areas with higher working class populations, the areas that for many, many years have been voting for Labour candidates, returning Labour members of Parliament to this House, the overwhelming sense was frustration, that people were tired of being ignored by their representatives, and Brexit was an obvious example. More than anything else, on the European Union, European policy, they were tired of being patronised by so many people who would claim to represent them. And we've even heard some of those sentiments today from the benches opposite. Suggestions that somehow, whether it was in the general election or in the referendum campaign, the voters who firstly voted for Brexit and now have voted overwhelmingly for a Conservative government with a strong Conservative majority, either didn't understand the question, they were misled either by lies or clever slogans. Perhaps their prejudices meant that they couldn't take a fair decision. Well, I think that these sentiments expressed by, unfortunately, a few of the members opposite, and particularly Labour members opposite, say rather more about the members making those expressions than it does about the voters up and down our country who have voted now 3 times for Britain to leave the European Union. They voted in that referendum. They voted for 2 parties in 2017, both of whom promised faithfully that they were committed to implementing that referendum result. And then, when it turned out the main opposition party didn't actually mean what they said about keeping that promise, they voted last week to return a majority Conservative government with a good majority that will. The leader of the opposition has spent most of the last week trying to persuade anybody who'll listen that the reason for his party's worst election performance in over 80 years was about Brexit rather than his own hopeless leadership. It is therefore extremely disappointing that he intends to march his members of parliament through the division lobbies this afternoon to once again ignore those voters, many of whom are had been until last week, had been lifelong Labour supporters, Labour voters. In one case I spoke to, going back to the days they'd voted for Clement Attlee in 1951 but could no longer vote for this Labour Party because it's a Labour Party that doesn't speak for them, doesn't listen to them, so I will be supporting this bill today.
Grant.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to be able to speak in this debate. I'll be speaking and voting against the bill today, as I did 2 months ago. In the intervening period, of course, I've had the endorsement of 51.5% of my electorate in Glenrothes and Central Fife, for which I am enormously grateful. More importantly, my constituents voted by a majority of 4-1 for candidates who were opposed to this bill. My nation, my one nation, voted by 3-1 for candidates and parties who were against this bill. So to everyone who has told the Scottish National Party and other opposition parties from Scotland that there's some kind of duty on us to tag along with the Prime Minister just now, no. The only duty that any MP from Scotland can possibly discharge is to vote against this bill, to vote against this Brexit, and to vote against a government that is determined to show its complete contempt for the sovereign status of the citizens of Scotland, sovereign status which this Parliament unanimously agreed less than 2 years ago. I hear people saying that this is a great time, a great victory for the people. The Secretary of State wrote to us all yesterday saying what a great advance this was for the rights of our citizens. No, it's not. There's not a single citizen of these islands whose rights will be enhanced by the passage of this bill. True. Tens of millions of citizens will see their rights diminished. 3 million are now having to call into question yet again whether they will continue to have the right to live and work and love here as they always have done. The Prime Minister gave promises before the referendum on the 1st of June 2016. He broke those promises. I challenged him about it again on the 25th of July 2019, and you can check Hansard if you want to check it. And again, he made those promises that this exactly the same rights that EU citizens have just now, they'll continue to have after Brexit. And then he published this bill that tears up those promises yet again. And the government and the backbenchers are saying to us, on citizens' rights, on the rights of child refugees, on environmental protection, on food standards, it's not in the bill, but trust the Prime Minister. Well, last week, Mr Deputy Speaker, Scotland gave a very, very clear message to the Prime Minister. We do not believe you. We do not trust you. We will not allow you to take our nation out of this union of nations against the express will of our people, expressed in 2016, expressed in 2017, expressed twice in 2019. When is this party, this government that's reaching out across the House, when is it going to listen? And we heard a lot from earlier speakers about how important it is for the government to abide by its manifesto and what happens to parties when they don't abide by the manifesto. Could I suggest, as some of the Christmas reading, honourable and right honourable members opposite, look at the manifesto on which the National Government of Scotland was elected in 2016, and look in particular about the mandate that was sought and given as to what Scotland will do if and when we are taken out of the European Union against our will. And I say to those reasonable members in the Conservative benches, and I know there are quite a few, please speak to your Prime Minister. and warn the Prime Minister of what will happen if he attempts to stand in the way of a democratically elected national government doing no more than deliver on the promises that it was trusted to deliver by the people of Scotland. Because otherwise, I have to say, particularly to members from English constituencies, because Brexit is essentially about England's inability to sort out its relationship with Europe. Scotland and Northern Ireland voted against. Wales voted for, but without a great deal of enthusiasm. That if the MPs representing English constituents take this step to go past the point of no return in the relationship with their neighbours across the North Sea, across the Channel and against the Irish Sea, they will also be taking England past the point of no return in the union with its neighbour across the Solway Firth.
Steve Devil.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And can I say it's an absolute pleasure to deliver the speech with you in the chair, albeit only briefly, but it's a great honour to serve while you're in the chair, and an honour to follow the honourable gentleman from the SNP. Can also start by placing on record my great thanks to the people of St Austell and Newquay for returning me to this House for the third time. I do not take any of those votes for granted, and will continue to serve them to the best of my ability. I will be supporting this bill tonight, and I just want to very briefly give 3 reasons why I believe it is the right thing to support this bill. Firstly, and most importantly for me, is because it delivers on the referendum result. It gets Brexit done. And we have spent far too long in this place, those of us who have been here over the last 3.5 years, going round and round in circles, frustrating the life out of the country whilst we make no progress at all. But at last, after 3.5 long years, we get to cross the line, we get to pass this bill so that we can all move on. We get to do what we said to the people we would do in 2016, to take back control of our laws, our borders and our money. And this bill passed the way for us to be able to do just that. And at last we have a Parliament that is willing to make that decision, that is actually representing what the people voted for in 2016. The other reason I believe it's right to support this bill is it does end the uncertainty. There's one thing that I heard loud and clear when the general election result came through just last week, was a huge sigh of relief from people right across my constituency, and I believe right across the country, that we can end the uncertainty at long last. We can end the debate about whether or not we're going to leave the EU and actually get on and move forward. It's what business wants. It's actually what the European Union wants. It was quite clear that they welcomed the clear result of the general election because it provided a clear pathway forward instead of us to continue to go round and round in circles. And if I could just say to members of the party opposite that have made very, in their view, I'm sure, valid points about some of the things that are now missing in this bill that were in previous bills, you had your chance. You could have voted for the withdrawal agreement back in the spring, and you would have had the things that today you're mourning the loss of. You could have backed this withdrawal agreement just a few weeks ago, and the things that you regret now are missing would have been in that bill. But you decided to play politics. I'm sorry, Mr Deputy Speaker. The party opposite decided to play party politics and engage in a huge gamble. Well, I'm sorry, the gamble was lost. The British people have spoken. We're going to end the uncertainty. We're going to deliver Brexit. And the third reason for me is that it does path a way for our future outside of the European Union. It provides the way for a free trade agreement. And I do believe we can secure that by this time next year, because we've seen that when there is a hard deadline, the European Union can move quickly and will move quickly. So I actually welcome the inclusion of that hard deadline that says we will not extend and delay any further, but we will focus on making sure we get that trade agreement with the EU. But also it opens us up as a country to the rest of the world. As far from saying we will diminish our place in the world, I believe that the passing of this withdrawal agreement, of this bill, as we leave the European Union, paves the way for a truly global Britain to engage with the rest of the world. Sometimes it seems as some of the things that are said in this chamber is the world is just the European Union. It's not. There is a great big world outside of the European Union, and I look forward to us being able to engage with that as an independent nation once again.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Sir Gary. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair once again. Could I also thank my constituents who voted for me and returned me for the fourth time last week, and to welcome all new members to this place. But at the same time, I want to extend my heartfelt commiserations to colleagues who haven't been returned, that they will be sorely missed. There's so much wrong with this bill, even more so than there was in October. My real concerns are the impact on the economy. Yes, we haven't got an economic assessment, and I think that is an issue in itself that the government need to look at very carefully. But we do have enough analysis from economists to show that a free trade agreement of this sort will be so dramatic in terms of the loss in growth, up to 7%. Is the average that has been mentioned, up for a period of 15 years. Now, we already know, and I'm sure people are aware of this, of the growing impact on poverty of a faltering economy, the growing inequalities that we are experiencing in this country, the impact and the consequences that this will have, this type of deal will have on that, but also on public services, which are already emaciated, cannot be underestimated. And we also mustn't forget the regional disparities that constituencies like mine will be impacted on it, no doubt at all. But as bad as a free trade agreement is, a no deal, as again all the evidence shows, will be even more dramatic, so catastrophic that one doesn't like considering the impact. But again, not 7%, over 9% impact on economic growth, again for 15 years, impacting on not just us, but our children, our grandchildren. We really need to recognise this. And I fear, unfortunately, with the new Clause 33, that is, the real danger. And I would beg that the government look at this and do all that they can in the forthcoming weeks and months to prevent this. The general election, a lot of us have just fought, and a lot of us will have views on what that meant. I am going to hold any firm views until I see the British Election Survey as it's published, the most reliable evidence that you can get on the election in the new year. But I can't ignore what constituents were saying to me. They ignored or didn't believe the evidence, or even worse, didn't care. And I think there's a lot we need to take from that and what that means about how we conduct ourselves. Politics and politicians really need to take that on board. The emotional response to Brexit, and that has what it has been, I think is a lesson for all of us. So I reiterate, I categorically reject this bill, but I want to work with the government to make sure that we ameliorate the worst effects of it, so that it's not going to harm my constituents. And I implore the government to listen and do all that they can to build a consensus on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Rowley.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's a privilege to be returned to this place to represent my home area, North East Derbyshire, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here again and to continue doing that. And as my constituents would expect, I rise to support this bill, and I will be voting with the government tonight. And it is just over, or this afternoon even, it is just over a year since I stood in these benches, and unfortunately, with great regret, had to say that I would not be supporting my government when the initial iteration of this bill came. And that is something which I think all of us who served in the previous Parliament, particularly on these benches, regret what happened over the last year or so. Wherever we stood, whatever our views, there was a fog which descended on this place, which meant that people here, otherwise rational, otherwise willing to look at the wider picture, were unable to do so, and it paralysed our politics. And today marks a really important stage for many of us that we can start to move on. Because somewhere when that fog descended was somewhere when we became paralysed. It stopped being an issue about the European Union. It stopped being an issue about what trade deals we may or may not do in the future. It stopped being an issue about whatever regulation we may or may not adopt. It became a basic question of trust. And I do not say that with any triumphalism to the member for Wirral South, who's no longer in a place, but I thought made an excellent speech a number of minutes ago. I say it with relief. We are now going to be able to deliver on the decision of the British people, and however profoundly some people in this place disagree with it, that is a basic principle that we all need to recall and remember, and that is why I will be going through the government lobbies today. But I also want to address, again, something which was raised by people who are also not in their place, particularly the member for Bath. There is this weird conflation, which I regret hugely, in this place, that some values, liberal values, which I share, cannot be epitomised and cannot be espoused by those of us who also believe in leaving the European Union. The European Union is not the panacea for everything that is good in this country. But I also say the European Union has done many good things. I am somebody who believes in the values of openness, of tolerance, of inclusivity, of being welcoming, of wanting to be internationalist, of wanting to work with countries all across the world and in Europe. And I am also a Brexiteer, because I think, even if people profoundly disagree with me, that there is a case, that there is an intellectual case that can be made that you can be both of those. And what liberalism must consider, and those who advocate liberalism in this place must consider, that their conflation of those values with remaining is something which will do their cause a great disservice over the long term. And then finally, I would just appeal, and I hope you don't mind as somebody who's been here for only 2 years, I would just appeal to those of us who have been in this chamber for a little bit of time. The debate today has been good in many senses, but it has also started to see the retreat into the comfort zones of some people here. We have already started to see the excuses, the desires that I would want to support this in principle, but I'm unable to do so for some confected or real reason. But actually, what the greatest speech which I think we've seen here today, which again, the member is not in the place, is from a member from South Shields, who has stood up and said, I don't agree with this, but I'm going to do it. Now, I happen to agree with it. And in time, I may disagree with something, but when the people say something, I hope that I will be enough of a Democrat in time to be able to recognise that. And the thing which I really regret about this place is, if we had spent one iota of the time that we have done in the last 2.5 years talking about Brexit, about the things which are actually going to cause our areas and challenge our areas in the next 20 years, automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, we might actually be preparing our country for the challenges that are coming. So let's get this done, and let's talk about all the other important things we need to do.
Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Sir Gary, and pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I thank as well with the honourable member for North East Derbyshire, who spoke characteristically, thoughtfully, and without triumphalism. And I think that he is absolutely right. And the tone of this debate from now on, and I speak as must be in that tone, I speak as someone who represents a constituency that voted 78% for Remain. But let's be clear while we're here, Sir Gary. It has been a total failure of political craft. In 2015, even I voted for that second referendum, because it is a convention in this House to support a government with a majority in the early days of its administration. And in 2015, the Conservative Party won the general election, and I backed that referendum against many of my instincts to do so. But from then on, it was a failure, a slow, a cumbersome, secretive, and it was a lot of dither. And I very reluctantly and late in the day came to the idea of a second referendum as a way of breaking that impasse. But it was not something that even in my very Remain constituency was part of the major discourse in 2017 in that general election. So I think when we're having debates about this, and as the honourable member said, entrench into positions, we have to remember that, and I urge the other side to remember that too. And I know that the Secretary of State, we've served together on the Public Accounts Committee, as I have indeed with the member for North East Derbyshire. That committee represented every range of views on Brexit in the last 2.5 years. You couldn't have had a more diverse range. And yet we produced over 11 reports that were unanimous, that were critical at times of the government, quite rightly, because I would hope the right honourable gentleman would expect us to be critical of him when he gets things wrong. But we went at it constructively looking at the facts and looking at the data and working hard to try and press the government to do a better job. So I do hope that although I won't vote for this bill today, because I'm going to list the reasons why, that the government listens to those reasons, because they aren't just because we feel sore losers, but because there are very valid reasons that this rushed bill and the rushed debate on it could lead to real problems for the future. It's weak on workers' rights. That is categorically clear. And in assuming that there's going to be a trickle-down of benefits when businesses allegedly, or hopefully as the government would say, do well, is a poor argument. In my constituency, there are very many people working several low-paid jobs on irregular contracts, very insecure. I can't see how they're going to get the benefits, and I want to see that protection in law. There's the removal of the support for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, something I've been dealing with as an elected politician since 1994, when we found them wandering alone on Holloway Road in Islington, where I was then a councillor. And the importance of the EU partnership in dealing with that is important. But let's not forget why they come. It's trafficking. So, Gary, let's deal with the cause, not the symptom. And I think it is mean-spirited to take that out. And there are many issues which we haven't got time to go into today around security. And I was the Home Office Minister negotiating for the British government on many of these issues when we were last in government, which is now quite some time ago. There are other issues too. The fixed end of the implementation period, I think, is a really foolish step, if I may say respectfully to the right honourable gentleman, because it allows no wriggle room. And I know there's this great belief on the government side that if you set a deadline, you'll get a better negotiation. I think there's a real risk there that you could end up throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and that will not bring the country together. And then, of course, we're going to see the phoenix of the quangos, as many of our European regulations have to be replicated in British law. So much for the bonfire of red tape. And on immigration, I tremble. I represent myself and the Honourable Member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington represent between us 40,000 EU citizens. And any idea that the government can suddenly turn the immigration system and make a great, simple new deal on immigration is foolhardy. I've been there. I've seen 10 years of it getting worse, and I think that the government needs to heed that warning very carefully. But I'm also concerned about the length of time, Sir Gary, for debating this. It is too short and it's not democratic.
Thank you, Sir Gary. Welcome to your place. I hope you enjoy your time in the chair. And it's a pleasure to be back here in Parliament, although it's felt a little bit like Groundhog Day again today. I hope for the final time, as we all are able to move on. On Brexit, we've given all of us the same speech over and over and over again for the last 2.5 years in what has been a cyclical and repetitive debate that has gotten us nowhere until this election has provided a very decisive breakthrough. And it's fantastic to be here to begin to deliver for the people of this country when we have made these promises for so long, to now be able to begin to legislate to get Brexit done. And it may be the perfect day in politics, because not only are we able to begin that process, but the Attorney General has also gifted us his version of A Night Before Christmas, which will make for a very festive time that should meet with universal acclaim. It is a fantastic day for us all. The people of Mansfield voted 71% to leave in the referendum, and they've shared our frustration and the anger felt by many people in this place over the last 2.5 years. They wanted us to be grown-ups and to sort this thing out. And they were decisive in this election too. They returned me to this place with an increased mandate and an increased majority. And I thank them profusely, and I intend to serve them with all sincerity and to the best of my ability in this Parliament. And that starts with delivering this bill beginning today. And I tell them now there is no reason or excuse why we can't get this done now by the 31st of January. We will get it delivered and we will do exactly as we have promised. And I'm sure that the majority of my constituents will celebrate in that fact. I welcome the commitments in this bill, new commitment to this 2020 deadline for a trade deal. I think we saw the impact of a never-ending, constantly moving deadline in the previous Parliament that simply did not work, that weakened our hand, and now we have the ability to show that strength and the determination that the Prime Minister has shown throughout his time in office. And I would like to point out to members opposite who consistently have raised issues of workers' rights, of regulatory standards. This isn't a bill about workers' rights or regulatory standards. It's not true to say that there is an inevitable decline in those things from leaving the European Union. The fact is, and the point of all this, is that this House will decide, and this country will decide, our own standards and regulatory standards. And actually, you continue, or not you, Mr. Streeter, Sir Gary, but the opposition continue to miss the point of what Brexit was about. There was a very well-known slogan in the referendum about control. You may remember it. It was largely, for many people, about control and about the sovereign powers of this Parliament. Aligning ourselves to EU directives defeats the entire purpose of what Brexit was about. We can, as a UK Parliament, go further and faster and better than the European Union in areas like the environment, in areas like workers' rights, and it will be us in this place that will decide. And that is exactly what all of us who have pushed to get this thing over the line over the last few years have been waiting for. So I'll back this bill today. I look forward to planning with certainty this time for a celebration on the 31st of January in my constituency, and I have huge optimism for the future of this country with this fantastic and decisive and determined Conservative government.
David.
Thank you, Sir Gary. It's clear that the Conservatives overwhelmingly won the election for a variety of reasons, but on the Brexit front, it is also the case that 16.5 million people voted for Remain parties, compared to 14.5 million for Leave parties. And in fact, when you add on the parties that don't support the particular deal, namely the Brexit Party, there's 18.1 million people who aren't supporting this oven-ready deal that we're being served up and asked to consume very quickly today. And I think on that basis, there still should be a public vote on this, because this is the long-term future of Britain. I know people don't agree, but my judgment is that we'll be poorer, weaker, more divided and isolated, and that people who voted Leave in my constituency, and of course many did, voted for more money, more control and more jobs. And they will judge this deal on whether they deliver that. And I say to people who've taken Labour seats on the back of Get Brexit Done, if we don't deliver those things Leave voters asked for, they will be very unhappy. And it's not just that they're unhappy, they will have lost their jobs, and I assume they will come back to the Labour Party. We are leaving the single market, and one of the primary architects of that, of course, was Margaret Thatcher, who saw this as probably the most perfect free and fair trade market in the world. And we are not just saying we'll have no alignment, or indeed we won't have a dynamic alignment, but we'll have dynamic disalignment. In other words, as the European Union changes its rules, we'll change our rules in a different way. And what this means is that the prospects of agreeing a deal within 12 months become vanishingly small, and the prospects of knowing we'll agree a deal in 6 months by June even less. And this also means that the Chinese and the United States and other countries will look at us and see we're increasingly turning our back on our biggest markets, which gives them bigger power in negotiations. As we stand alone, turning our back on the EU, when we talk to the United States, who will say they don't want any environmental considerations to do with climate change in their trade deals, as they already have. They don't really care that much about food standards. They want hormone-impregnated meat and chlorinated chicken. They do want our NHS database. They do want to enforce patents so drugs will be more expensive. And it is the case they sell asbestos and all the rest of it. So as we move away from the regulatory protection of the EU, we are in their hands. And on human rights, when we talk to China, we will have to obviously be on our bent knee to China in terms of getting trade. They will say, no, don't mention human rights in Hong Kong and all this sort of stuff. Just stay to the point and do what we say. They're already building HS2 and, in fact, a lot of other infrastructure here. So it's important that this Parliament, if this is about democracy, we have greater scrutiny of these trade deals, and we go into these things with our eyes opened. Finally, on human rights, I'm very concerned about this issue about unaccompanied minors, and frankly, it did have a strange echo of remembering that Donald Trump, of course, has separated children from their parents who are refugees and put them in detention camps. This is our, our great friend Donald Trump. And at the same time, in the Queen's speech, we've seen the abolition of the BBC, the civil service, the judiciary. They're all under threat. So our fundamental values shared across Europe of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law are under threat. And I would say to all new members in particular, think carefully about what's in the balance here. I know you're driving through in great merriment on the back of great Get Brexit Done in sort of pre-Christmas pantomime mode, but we need to think what's best for Britain and best for democracy, and that means proper scrutiny of this bill.
Please, Mr. Mark Horsey.
Thank you, Sir Gary, and it's a great pleasure to be the tail ender on this side in a debate which has had a very welcome change in tone from that of previous debates on this topic. May I first of all thank the voters of Rugby and Bulkington for returning me for the 4th time with a increased majority, as I think is the case for almost all colleagues on this side, and is an endorsement of our party's attitude. And I will be supporting the bill to leave the European Union this afternoon, as I have done on 4 previous occasions. And I want to reflect on the effect on business. On the Business Select Committee, we looked at the impact of leaving the EU on automotive, aerospace, food and drink and pharmaceutical. And in each case, business leaders told us a few benefits of leaving the EU, and their concerns that what benefits there were would be outweighed by the harm, and much of the harm has been the uncertainty that business has had to go through over the past 2.5 years. Businesses want to see frictionless trade, to be able to continue with just-in-time supply chains and to retain access to a market of 500 million consumers on their doorsteps. And I know from my own business career before arriving here, it is easiest to deal with your closest neighbours, and that will be very important in the comprehensive trade deal that we conduct with the EU once we have left. It will be important not to neglect what's on our doorstep. But the business view about the need to get Brexit done is just as strong as that all of us encountered when we were on the doorsteps. And as a West Midlands MP, I'm very concerned about the impact on automotive. Many of my constituents work for Jaguar Land Rover, and many of the companies in my constituency are in the supply chain. And it is of concern that the Society of Motor Manufacturers figures out today show UK output down year on year. Part of that because of shutdowns that were put in place to deal with the concerns of disruption caused by potentially leaving the EU without a deal on the 31st of October. It is important that we've now got that uncertainty out of the way, and businesses will be able to grow and develop. And we will start to see very substantial investment. In fact, over the last couple of years, despite the uncertainty of Brexit, there has been substantial private sector investment in my own constituency. Megit, involved in components for aerospace, are currently building the biggest factory to be built in the UK for 10 years. Moto are building a new motorway service area at Junction 1 of the M6 in Rugby. And local builder and developer Stepnells have just delivered a whole range of medium-sized industrial units ready for existing businesses to expand into. Developments at this scale and at a time of great uncertainty lead me to be extremely confident that there is a pipeline of new projects that can now get started, because we are on our way of dealing with leaving the European Union, and that will benefit communities and workers all across the UK. And in my last minute, I just want to refer to the effect on democracy, and I noted the remarks of the member for Ashford. I too noticed on the doorsteps during the campaign that many constituents told us they wouldn't be voting, they wanted to opt out. Now that's not unusual, because many people have a low opinion of politicians, but I sensed that at this election there were more people intending to not vote or to waste their vote, and because they had voted in the referendum and the politicians that had not delivered on what they'd voted for. Politicians cannot, we in this place cannot choose which votes we wish to respect, and we are now able to deliver for all of those who voted in the general election and in the referendum.
Thank you very much. Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Sir Gary. This has been a good debate on an extremely important bill. But before I turn to the bill, can I welcome the Secretary of State back to his place? And can I welcome all new members across the House to their places and the part that they will play in this Parliament. I hope they will get the support and comfort that they need wherever they sit. I want to make special mention to those making maiden speeches. We've had 3 of them in this debate, and in the best traditions across the House, they've been thoughtful and powerful. I actually always find maiden speeches a relief, because the House goes quiet and actually listens just for 5 minutes or 10 minutes to what the member's actually saying. And it's quite refreshing, because we don't do that often enough. And so I think both the speeches themselves and the way in which this House has listened to them have been a good example of the tradition that we need to carry on with. There have been other very good contributions across the House, and the tone has been markedly different in the main from the tone of previous debates, and let us keep it that way. The Right Honourable Member for Fareham spoke. She's not in her place. I used to face her across the dispatch box. I have to say I can't pretend I agree with very much of what she says. But she did reference that it was her first speech since she had become a mum. And therefore, I'm sure I speak for the whole House in congratulating her and all those new parents since Parliament was dissolved. We've had a general election. There is a clear winner with a clear majority. So I say this to members opposite. With that majority, be careful. Be careful. Doing things because the government has a majority doesn't mean those things are right. New Clause 37 is an example of that. This is about unaccompanied child refugees. This was the incredible campaign that Lord Dubs, Alf Dubs, ran to protect child refugees post-Brexit. And that campaign's been running for several years, that campaign for unaccompanied child refugees. And I know that members across the House have supported that campaign. Members from these benches and those benches have spoken powerfully about the case for unaccompanied child refugees. The commitment that was in the bill has been taken out. That is a moral disgrace, majority or no majority. And so I ask for those that will go into the lobby tonight to vote for this bill, and I know they will, and I understand that, but many of them will feel strongly about unaccompanied child refugees, and I ask them just to reflect for a moment on that. I turn to my own benches. We may have lost the general election, but we've not lost our values and our beliefs. Yeah. And we must fight for them day in, day out in this Parliament, and we will. So let me address the central issue. As a result of the general election, as a result of the majority the government's got, and the mandate the government's got, we're leaving the EU. We will have left the EU within the next 6 months. Whatever side we were on, or no side at all, the Leave Remain argument goes with it. That doesn't mean that the deal negotiated by the Prime Minister is a good deal. It isn't. It was a bad deal in October when it was signed. It was a bad deal when it was first debated in this House in October. It was a bad deal last Thursday, and it's a bad deal today. In fact, it's worse today. It's worse today. Clause 30 in the previous bill gave Parliament a role in what happens next. There's a crucial decision to be taken in 6 months' time as to whether or not there should be an extension of any transition. Under the old bill, that was a decision that we collectively in Parliament would take according to the evidence and circumstances as they are in 6 months. A chance for Parliament to assess where the negotiations had got to and come to a decision on whether a deal would be negotiated within the period and take whatever measures are necessary to prevent no deal. That's been swept away. That's been taken out of the bill. All the promises that were made from that dispatch box about a new approach, that Parliament would be involved. We were told only a few weeks ago the Prime Minister had learned the lessons, and that one of the lessons was that to plough on without taking Parliament with you was a mistake, and there'll be a new approach because Parliament would be involved. And at the first opportunity, it's taken out. The new Clause 33 exacerbates that. This prevents the extension of any transition period. That is reckless and it's ridiculous, because the government has now chosen to give itself just 11 months to negotiate an entire trade deal and security deal. That's an unbelievably short period. And it can only lead to two outcomes: a bare-bones trade deal or no deal. I hear the chuntry. But if in November the negotiations have been going well, and let's hope they do, but they're not complete, and they need more time, and 2 months, 3 months would be enough. This now says we leave without a deal. So this doesn't provide for the situation where the negotiations have broken down. It also demands no deal where they're continuing. One of the other changes is Clause 34 and Schedule 4, the employment rights and protections. That's now gone. And it's said, oh, well, we'll put that in an employment bill. Well, let's just trace the history of that to test that proposition. There's a bill coming. Workplace rights were originally in the legally binding part of the deal agreed by the previous Prime Minister, and the internationally legally binding part. They were stripped out by this Prime Minister. They were put into the first draft of the bill before the general election, albeit in weak form. And on the 22nd October, in response to a question from my honourable friend from Batley and Spen, the Prime Minister said, people will need reassurance, there can be no regression. They've now been stripped out. The direction of travel is very clear, and nobody should be taken in by assurances about any forthcoming bill. And frankly, when the Prime Minister this morning referenced, I think, the Factories Act, that didn't give us any. It's worth dusting off the Factories Act if that is the level of ambition for future workplace rights. If that is the height, if that's the shining example of what we're heading for, it gives 1841. So this started life as a bad bill. It's now even worse. The changes the government have made weaken protections for workplace rights, sideline Parliament, and weaken protections for child refugees. It tells you everything you need to know about the Prime Minister and this government, about their priorities and their values. They're not Labour values. This is not a deal we can support, and we'll be voting against it tonight. Thank you.
Brilliant. Mr. Secretary Barclay.
Mr Deputy Speaker, can I join the Right Honourable and Learned Member for Holborn and St Pancras in welcoming new members to the House and also in reflecting the positive tone of the debate and the marked contrast that has been with previous debates in the previous Parliament. And can I also join him in congratulating and welcoming back the member for Fareham as a new mum to return her valued contributions to this House. Mr Deputy Speaker, the general election has delivered a clear instruction to this House to leave the European Union. Now Parliament must reflect the will of the country and make good on that democratic decision by backing this bill. This bill is not a victory for one side over another. The time has come to discard the old labels, to move from the past divisions and to come together as one united kingdom. Our country produced a mandate to leave the EU in 2016, but the previous Parliament rejected this time and time again. It has taken a second vote to ensure this mandate to leave is finally honoured. It is clear that the people did know in 2016 what they were voting for after all. Despite this, efforts of those determined not to accept the referendum result, we now have the opportunity in this House to end the delay and to forge a new relationship, both with our neighbours in Europe and indeed within this House. And it is reflecting that spirit that I very much welcome the speech of the member for South Shields, who said she would support the bill in the lobby this evening. Before, Mr Deputy Speaker, turning to the substance of the bill, may I congratulate the member for Belfast South for her very impressive maiden speech. She showed that she will contribute greatly to the work of this House, and her point about reconciliation struck a timely tone. The member for North Down also gave an excellent maiden speech, as indeed did the member for Stirling, who spoke powerfully of his opposition to Brexit, albeit in leaving an EU institution to come here, he has started his own Brexit as we vote on the bill. This bill delivers certainty for our citizens living in Europe and EU citizens living here in the UK by guaranteeing their rights as set out in Part 3 of the bill. It includes an independent monitoring authority which will rightly hold the government to account. There will be a grace period to ensure nobody is left behind in registering for the EU settlement scheme. The bill also protects frontier workers. It recognises professional qualifications, and indeed it provides fair rights of appeal. This, Mr Deputy Speaker, is because we value the contribution of EU citizens who have built their lives in our country, and this bill will guarantee their rights to continue to do so.
My honourable friend's right to draw attention to the value that's been given to this country by those who've travelled here. But the point about that, as he said when he spoke of accountability, is those decisions should be made by this Parliament, accountable to the British people, and that's why I anticipate our policies on migration, which will now have a chance to effect as a result of the passage of this legislation.
Well, my right honourable friend has always been a champion of the sovereignty of this House, and I will come on to how this bill indeed champions the very sovereignty I know he cares so passionately about. But the bill also unlocks confidence for our businesses by ending the dither and delay, which in turn will unlock huge new investment in our economy, ensuring more and better jobs. And this bill provides control for our Parliament, as indeed my right honourable friend reflects. Clause 1 reinforces the repeal of the Act, which brought European law into the UK. The bill ensures parliamentary scrutiny through the European Scrutiny Committee in Clause 29 and asserts parliamentary sovereignty through Clause 38. And I think the whole House will recognise the work of the member for Stone on this and so many issues reflected in this bill. The very essence of Brexit is that we will no longer outsource our decisions to others in Brussels.
Of course. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. We've heard a lot from the members opposite about their fear of bringing those decisions back to the United Kingdom, particularly about workers' rights. Can he absolutely confirm that this government has every intention of protecting and improving the rights of workers in this country? Who are overwhelmingly back the Conservatives in this election.
Well, I know my honourable friend is a champion of workers' rights and his constituents, and indeed he will know that not only does the manifesto make that clear commitment, page 5 of the manifesto sets out a clear commitment, but does so in parallel to this bill. Because this bill is about implementing into domestic law the international agreement my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has reached with the EU. But we do not in this House need others to tell us how to protect workers' rights and other rights. And indeed, as my honourable friend well knows, in many areas, this Parliament goes further than the EU in the rights it safeguards, not least in areas such as maternity and paternity rights. And I look forward, following the manifesto commitment to high standards, to this House continuing that tradition and maintaining good standards. Of course I will give way.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. One of the things that concerns my folks on the Isle of Wight and indeed the South Coast was seeing a super trawler hoovering up about 250 tonnes of fish a day off Shanklin and indeed off Eastbourne. And isn't one of the great benefits of the withdrawal bill and leaving the European Union and getting a new fisheries bill is that we will control our ability to stop super trawlers coming into our seas, which at the moment we're not allowed to do because of our membership of the European Union.
Well, my honourable friend is right. One of the key features of taking back control of our waters is indeed that we in this Parliament will make those decisions. And one of the mysteries that we often feel with the benches opposite is that those in Scotland don't have self-confidence in order to have those decision-making powers, want to give them back to those in Europe. I'll take one more and then make progress, David.
Listening with great interest to what my right honourable friend is saying, but can he also confirm that when we leave the EU, we'll have control over our taxes again, and we can make decisions on VAT and all the other taxes we want to do?
Well, my honourable friend is right, and indeed, if you look what we will do with the control of our taxes, the commitments in our manifesto, and also what this government has already done to raise the amount people can earn before they pay tax, because we believe in backing those who wish to work and provide for their families, and our tax system will do exactly that. Mr Deputy Speaker, along with the terms of our withdrawal, this bill reflects the political declaration which sets out the framework of our future relationship. Now, we need to get on with negotiating on this basis so we can agree our future relationship by the end of the implementation period on 31st December 2020. The Shadow Brexit Secretary referenced Clause 33. Clause 33 reinforces a commitment given by the government in its manifesto not to extend this period. And Part 5 of the political declaration is clear. We are committed to developing in good faith agreements giving effect to our future relationship, the cornerstone of which is a comprehensive free trade agreement by the end of 2020. Now, the Shadow Brexit Secretary said Clause 33 was ridiculous, but it is not ridiculous to act on manifesto commitments that we have given to the electorate. And indeed, it is not ridiculous when the EU themselves, in the political declaration, has agreed to the timetable to the end of December 2020 on which we make that commitment. And indeed, if that was the central concern of the benches opposite, you would have thought that would have been better reflected in talks on earlier deals when the party raised many other objections which underlined the fact that they simply did not want to see Brexit delivered at all. Mr Deputy Speaker, we now have a deal that reflects both the single largest democratic exercise in British history in the referendum and the defining issue of the general election. It is the time to end the delay, to come together and heal our divisions, and above all to listen to the people we serve. The British public have given their instruction. This bill delivers Brexit. I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the bill now be read a second time. As many of that opinion say aye? Aye! The contrary, no? No! Order. Question is the bill now be read a second time. As men of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no.
No.
The tellers for the ayes, Mr. Ian Stewart and Mr. Stuart Andrew. The tellers for the noes, Jeff Smith and Thangam Debonair.
Lock the doors.
Could the Sergeant investigate the delay in the eye lobby, please?
Yes, quite right.
Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 358. The noes to the left, 234.
The ayes to the right were 358. The noes to the left were 234. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Back at the net.
Programme motion move formally.
I beg to move.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. No.
Question is, as on the order paper, as many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No! Tellers for the ayes, Ian Stewart and Stuart Andrew. Tellers for the noes, Jeff Smith and Thankham Debonair. Lock the doors. Order! Order!
The ayes to the right were 353. The noes to the left were 243.
The ayes to the right were 353. The noes to the left were 243. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. Money resolution move formally.
I beg to move.
Question is, as on the order paper. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary no. The ayes have it. Ways and Means resolution move formally.
I beg to move.
Question is, as on the order paper. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. This is probably strictly out of order, but I suspect that honourable members will be leaving in a few moments. Can I, on behalf of the Speaker, wish all honourable members on both sides of the House a happy Christmas and a very peaceful New Year. The question is that the House do now adjourn.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks very much.
Merry Christmas.
And cheers. Thanks very much.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks very much.
Merry Christmas. I like your style. Yes.
Cheers, mate. Have a great Christmas.
Order! We're trying to start an adjournment debate. Could honourable members leave the chamber quietly, please? Sir David Amos.
Mr Deputy Speaker, for a moment I was tempted to say, before the House adjourns for the Christmas recess, there are a number of points that I wish to raise, but I think we have a title for this adjournment debate, and the House will not be surprised when I say it's to describe how Southend will become a city, and of course the Prime Minister said just 6 weeks ago that Southend will become a city. But before that, Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to mention 3 newly elected colleagues. Little did I think that the daughter of my first constituency chairman in 1983, when I was elected the member for Basildon, little did I think that her daughter, the honourable member for Derbyshire Dales, would be sitting here now. So I think her parents are looking down from heaven, so proud that she's been elected. And then there is another big surprise for me, because you, Mr Deputy Speaker, couldn't remember my colleague who was my best friend here, Ken Hargreaves, who was the member for Hyndburn. Well, little did I know that the gentleman, Peter Brickcliffe, who used to run his office and stood twice for the seat, that his 24-year-old daughter has now been elected for Hyndburn. So I'm sure that Ken Hargreaves is looking down from heaven with great pride. And then there is probably the most extraordinary election of all. Because you see, Mr Deputy Speaker, just 3 months ago I was invited to Durham University. The motion was that this House has no confidence in Her Majesty's government, and I opposed the motion. Now, we won't dwell on it, but 2 parliamentary colleagues, for various reasons, pulled out at the last minute. So they had to find a replacement. And that replacement now is the Member of Parliament for Bishop Auckland at the age of 26. So this is an extraordinary occasion for me. And if I had more time, I would mention the 46 and in total the 109 new colleagues that we have. But I now need to concentrate on the Minister, because I'm not messing around, Mr Deputy Speaker. We've got it from the Prime Minister that Southend is going to become a city, and it will become a city. And with my honourable friend, the member for Rochford and Southend East present, we are absolutely united as to why Southend should become a city. Now, it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost a thing. But I say to my honourable friend, the Minister, for the people that I represent, it will meet a a great deal in enhanced status and the ability to attract new investment. So that's why we want it. Now, how does anyone acquire city status? Well, you need a contest. And we had a contest in 2011, 2002, and in 2000. It's usually around a royal event. Well, the Duke of Edinburgh will be 100 in 18 months' time. And I'm working on other royal events to see how we can fine-tune it. But it would be great, I say to my honourable friend the Minister, if it happens next year, because that is the centenary of the Mayoralty of Southend, which runs between 2020 and 2221. And I do think, Mr Deputy Speaker, now that we've moved on for this horrible atmosphere in this place, we've got to be positive. And what a more positive way than starting by Southend being declared a city.
First of all, can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Southend for his hard work to make sure that Southend did achieve, or will achieve, the city status. When you look at what Southend has, it's got many great things: a strong city centre, churches, representative council, it's got a good education, excellent amenities, and like Lisbon and Northern Ireland, it achieved city status. I think it's important that Southend achieves its goal, and to the Honourable Member, right Honourable Member, well done to him for his hard work. We've supported him the whole way through in the time that I've been here, and we look forward to it being there. I might even get an invite to Southend whenever it gets a city status. I hope so.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman who I regard as my honourable friend for his intervention, and I'm very grateful for the support. So running through the list of things as why Southend should become a city. The Music Man project. Now, through the inspiration of David Stanley, he didn't leave people with learning difficulties to just be looked after. He's absolutely transformed their lives through the power of music. And you can imagine, Mr Deputy Speaker, my pride when these people with learning difficulties, first of all, performed at the London Palladium. And then our right honourable friend who was the Secretary of State for Defence, she was there in the gallery when we then performed at the Royal Albert Hall. And it gets better. We've just sent a mission to Broadway, and we'll now be taking our show of people with learning difficulties to Broadway. So that's one reason why we should be a city. And then Leigh-on-Sea was voted the happiest place in the United Kingdom. Well, I wasn't so happy knocking on doors recently, so I suppose I'm the one exception in the cold and dark. But we scored for community spirit, opportunity to develop skills, good restaurants and shops. And it's 150th anniversary of Southend Rugby Club. How good is that to keep a rugby club with volunteers going for 150 years? Now, the marina, which I think will probably be in my honourable friend, the member for Rochford and Southend East constituency, is going to be a fabulous marina, and that's another reason for it. We've got the longest pier in the world. Now, today you can't build piers, but there we are. A number of politicians felt they were walking on water. You come to Southend and you do walk on water through the longest pier. And we're reinventing and reinvigorating the trains. Now, during the election campaign, Mr Deputy Speaker, there were one or two issues which raised, but they all build into city status, which I'm going to mention quickly now. All colleagues think Southend Airport is fantastic. It's very, very convenient, and we're building a business park there, which is also going to be excellent in terms of regeneration. But I have to say that it is causing nuisance, upset among people when the two Amazon flights are taken off at 2:30 and 4:30 in the morning. There's difference in noise between EasyJet and Ryanair, and there's also an issue with air quality, and we can't keep having the airport talk about Section 106, so I want that changed. Now, donkeys years ago, Mr Deputy Speaker, when I was the MP for Basildon, I had a public row on TV with them and with the chairman of British Rail, and I was clapped when I came back through the division lobbies, and they said, good on you, David. He needed to be told, because we were called the misery line. So we changed it. I wanted Richard Branson to have the line, but we ended up with C2C. Now, during the general election campaign, I am disappointed, I say to my honourable friend, the Minister. The card reading machines, as I found this morning, it takes ages to read them. Absolutely stupid. The ticket machines, they're far too low down as you're trying to get to them. And when the sun's glaring onto the glass, you can't see that. And I'm sick to death every other week being redirected not from Fenchurch Street to Liverpool Street. So we need something done about that. And although I say to my honourable friends on this side, forget renationalising British Rail, we need to think about all the, and I'm one of the few who was there when we privatised all these industries, and it was under the Blair government that power was taken away from this place. We now need to make these organisations accountable, and that is where the problem is. We, the elected politicians who earn a third of the money that umpteen people who had these unelected positions earn, they need to be made much more accountable. And then, of course, the National Health Service. The Chief Executive of the NHS said at the start of the campaign, don't weaponise the NHS. So what happened? It was weaponised. All this rubbish about selling it to America. But particularly in my honourable friend and my area, and I was at Southend Hospital this morning doing my impersonation of Santa Claus, and I met one of our wonderful consultants there, Paul Geiler. The reorganisations of services between Basildon, Broomfield and Southend cannot continue unless they are clinically led. And they are clinically led, but we need people to put their heads above the parapet. And we need the ambulance service to reassure us that when they're moving patients around, they're not going to find that there are delays which could result in disaster. Environment and water quality. Well, I think the Thames estuary is getting clean all the time. I was standing in Bell Wharf recently, and a seal just popped out of the water and started clapping me. I thought, well, OK, it's someone else who's pleased with my re-election as a member of Parliament. And then parking. Now, I think, Mr Deputy Speaker, we've reached a stage in our lives when we know what all the problems are. It's the solutions we ask for. And perhaps with all these new colleagues, they're going to come up with some new solutions. But the area that I represent is a tiny urban area, and it's a real issue with parking problems. And, of course, if I say to my honourable friend, the Minister, I'm delighted that the government, in the gracious speech, is going to put money in for potholes. Now, moving on quickly, my honourable friend the Minister should know I am inviting ambassadors and anyone in who is the head of a foreign embassy in this country to visit Southend. So we've already had them from Taiwan, we've had them from Qatar, we're having them from India, we're having them from the Maldives, we're having them from all over the world, and they want to invest in Southend, and I think that's another good reason why we should be a city. Now, very good news from the hospital this morning, where I visited. I'm pleased to announce that the hospital has made a decision to invest in a new surgical robot in order to undertake prostate cancer surgery. And we had a launch here with the new charity Prostate 8 number, and this is going to change the lives of so many gentlemen who are diagnosed as having a prostate issue. And wasn't it so good, Mr Deputy Speaker, that our new Speaker decided to go public, just as the former Prime Minister did, about their issues as far as diabetes is concerned, because sometimes it's forgotten that we're not human beings and we do suffer all the happiness and tragedies of other people, and I think he'll be a role model in that. I'm also pleased to announce to my honourable friend the Minister that we are going to offer patients across Mid and South Essex out-of-hours emergency interventional radiology treatment. Another good thing to happen. And although my honourable friend the member for Chelmsford is no longer in her place, she's going to have a new MRI scanner, which again is going to help an awful lot of people. And the local authority, just to mention a few of the projects that they've got in place.
Better Queensway in my honourable friend's constituency. Successful procurement leading to a partnership with Swan Housing. The second phase of the Forum, partnership with South Essex College, supported by £6 million funding from the LEP. I've already mentioned the pier. Wheeled Sports Facility opened this summer. Sunrise, a great example of co-design and co-production in creating ideas for a new London road entrance to the High Street. The bid is working very well indeed. I've already mentioned the Airport Business Park with the development of 21-hectare site which will include the development of HQ-style office buildings. There's a planning application for Seaway development that's been submitted. Work is ongoing with Homes England and other partners to support the delivery of a significant pipeline of new housing across the borough. Digital infrastructure investment through City Fibre to ensure that Southend will be a gigabyte city and all households in Southend will have access to full fibre by 2022. I could go on and on and on, but I'm anxious that my honourable friend, the Minister, will have a little time to respond to.
I thank the member for giving way. Inverness, not in my constituency but in the Highlands, became a city some years ago, and it's been a great success. Part of that success has been the establishment of the Inverness tartan. Could I point out that Cornwall has its own tartan and that Suffolk has its special gingham plaid? I would strongly recommend to the honourable member, in the spirit of Christmas good wishes, and I salute an excellent speech, that he think about a Southend tartan.
Well, that's a brilliant idea. I wasn't expecting that Christmas present, and thank you. I thank the honourable member very much indeed for that suggestion. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I know the House has become tired of me asking for city status for Southend, but I'm a little wary, but I'm not going to shut up until it happens. So someone's got to get to that dispatch box, and I should raise it at the next Prime Minister's question time and tell me when this competition is going to happen. We've achieved this wonderful majority. We might have forgot how to govern, but we are the government now. We've got 5 years to make the most of the trust that we have been given by the British people. So let's start with Southend being made a city.
Mr Minister Quinn.
Thank you, Sir Roger. May I start by congratulating the honourable member for Southend West on securing this debate. I would say it's a pleasure to see his neighbour and colleague, the member for Rochford and Southend East, also in his place. In congratulating my honourable friend for securing it, he's managed to do that amazing thing. He's been both first and last. This is one of the first adjournment debates of this Parliament, but as is traditional, my honourable friend has also managed to get the last word in before the House rises. It was my privilege to reply in July, as the honourable member from Strangford will also recall. It was my privilege to reply in July on the debate on matters to be raised before the summer adjournment. In doing so, I remarked that it appeared the House could not rise for a recess without my honourable friend pressing the case for city status for Southend-on-Sea. And here we are again, Mr Chairman. I do not attribute this to any gift of prophecy on my part, but to the assiduity with which the honourable gentleman pushes his case. It is no surprise that the perseverance of my honourable friend is recognised by his constituents. I am delighted to welcome him back to this House, having secured an increased majority and over 59% of the votes cast. With him to represent him, no wonder Leigh-on-Sea is the happiest of places to live, and no wonder that even the seals appear to clap him. As a Minister in the Cabinet Office, and on behalf of my colleague, the Minister for the Constitution, I'm delighted to be able to share with my honourable friend and remind the House of the process by which Southend, and indeed other candidates around the United Kingdom, may seek to achieve city status. As ever, my honourable friend has also used this opportunity to speak of the many achievements and also the aspirations of Southend. He will forgive me if I don't respond to each of the points in detail, which more appropriately lie under the remit of other departments. He has, however, set out a clear set of priorities, which I know will be flagged within the departments concerned. Among the many advantages of a decisive government majority, As a former member of the Whip's office, I might repeat that. Among the many advantages of a decisive government majority and a clear sense of stability and purpose comes the opportunity for constituency MPs to pursue single-mindedly their action plans for their communities. I know my ministerial colleagues and I can look forward to hearing a lot more from my honourable friend over what I hope will be a long and a productive Parliament. As my honourable friend is aware, city status is one of the civic honours granted by the Queen under the royal prerogative on the advice of ministers, and it is a rare distinction. Only 14 new cities were created during the 20th century. Indeed, since the 1970s, there have only been 5 competitions, as a result of which a total of 13 towns were awarded city status, with each competition seeing an increase in applications. With the exception of the competition held in 2000 to mark the millennium, all of these were held to mark significant anniversaries of Her Majesty's accession to the throne. I'm sure my honourable friend will understand the need to preserve the special status of such an honour by ensuring competitions are held to mark anniversaries of sufficient significance. As my honourable friend is very aware, from his interaction to which he referred with my right honourable friend the Prime Minister, his determination on this issue is very much recognised. We will continue to consider when it might be appropriate to hold another city status competition. I know my honourable friend is alert to possible opportunities and is certainly not shy in drawing these to the attention of government, for which we are grateful. Today there are currently 69 cities in the United Kingdom, 51 in England, 7 in Scotland, 6 in Wales and 5 in Northern Ireland. Competitions are fair and open to protect the value of city status. There are no specific criteria against which progress can be measured, but entries are considered on the merits of their contents rather than on the standard of presentation. I appreciate why, with a population of 175,000, some 5,600 businesses and an economy valued at over 2.6 billion, Southend views itself as a suitable candidate, even before one takes into account its role as a transport hub, to which my honourable friend referred, its role as a tourist destination, amid many sources of justifiable civic pride, and it was wonderful to hear again about Music Man and what a phenomenal success that is. I know Southend-on-Sea entered the 2012 city status contest and was unfortunately unsuccessful, along with a number of other towns. Whilst granting a city status is purely about the honour, with no additional funding or powers attached to it, I entirely understand my honourable friend's continuing endeavours to secure city status for Southend. We will never tire of him speaking about this in this chamber. He's very wrong in suggesting that that might be the case. I know that he will continue to pursue with great assiduity the cause. However, I do want to take this opportunity to reassure my honourable friend that whatever its civic status, the government is committed to investing in and supporting Southend and the local area on issues that matter to his constituents. My colleague at the Department of Health and Social Care have informed me that significant investment is already underway at Southend Hospital, and clearly this is something my honourable friend was briefed on in his role as Father Christmas only this morning. This includes the installation of more radiotherapy machines, and in particular, as he referred to it, the use of a surgical robot to undertake prostate cancer surgery. This is an important issue to which I recall my honourable friend made reference in the summer recess debate. The improvements will greatly expand the availability of robotic surgery to patients suffering from cancer, and will reduce waiting times and give patients the option of receiving care in Mid and South Essex who may otherwise have had to travel outside the area for treatment. This will secure Southend's position as a centre of excellence in cancer care and for the treatment of the people of Essex. We're also investing in the local economy. In 2014, we signed off on the Southend City deal and put funding of around £1.5 million towards a growth hub to offer support to local businesses. The ripple effect of this, I trust, continues to be a benefit to the local economy. Southend, which of course boasts, as my honourable friend mentioned, the longest pleasure pier in the world, receiving some 367,000 visitors annually, has also received £1.3 million from the Coastal Communities Fund to expand tourism services. I understand Southend has also benefited from funding from the local enterprise partnership, including the £23 million for a new business park adjacent to London Southend Airport, to which my honourable friend referred. There will be many opportunities for Southend to seize as we achieve our exit from the European Union, and opportunities stemming from our focus on the Thames Estuary 2050 growth path, including via the Thames Estuary Growth Board, to which the new chair, Kate Willard, was appointed on the 30th of October. My honourable friend raised concerns about the rail franchise and ticket machines. I know he has been raised this on a number of occasions and raised the frustration of his constituents. He will be aware of this government's commitment to end the complicated franchising model and to create a simpler, more effective rail system. I'm sure we can look forward to progress on that area. While I would suggest that my honourable friend should take up the specifics of the Section 102 agreement to which he refers with other ministers, I recognise as a constituency MP with a constituency in close proximity to Gatwick some of the concerns he's raised. I trust he's aware of the Independent Commission on Civil Aviation Noise, a relatively new body providing independent advice to the government, including on how to improve public confidence and trust in the management of aviation noise. And if my honourable friend has not done so already, which he may well have done, I would recommend you might find a discussion with ICANN of interest. To conclude, I would like to thank the honourable member for Southend West for raising this important issue. He is indeed a doughty champion for his constituents and his constituency, and these last few minutes as one closes a parliamentary period wouldn't be the same without his contribution on the issue. Finally, may I thank you, Sir Roger, for your comments on behalf of the Speaker, wishing us all a happy Christmas. May I extend that on behalf of the House and the Government to yourself and to all the clerks and the staff of this place who work hard throughout the year, but in particular in the last few days supporting new and returning members. And I would like to wish everyone a very happy Christmas.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Order, order.